Major Shah, now talking about China's economy, we've seen several of the agencies, IMF including, and several banks world over that do these economic surveys that have said that China is the only Asian country which is growing, in fact, in the opposite direction, when other Asian nations, including India, are in fact, our economic growth has been increasing in an extraordinary rate. China, on the other hand, either some of the studies say that they're moving extremely slowly, or some say they're in fact reducing. So it's not the greatest economy in the world as it used to be. And Li Qiang now going to be premier, who is handling the economic affairs of China.
Absolutely, Aarti. You know, I will just state a few facts, basic ones. Li Qiang, who is actually supposed to be the second most powerful man of China, who was under the shadows of Xi Jinping for over a decade, in fact. So he didn't really come into limelight. He was introduced to politics during the chaotic 1966 to 1976. There was a cultural revolution in China, a very, very famous cultural revolution. Then he made it to the prestigious Peking University. Peking is basically another name for Beijing, in fact, the capital of China. So he went to the Peking University where he studied law, economics, and on his merits, he did all that. Instead of using any political connections, he did that all on his own steam. Fine. After graduation, Li went on to work as the Communist Youth League, on an organization that grooms university students for party roles. And he entered active politics there. Then, which was headed by future president and party leader at that time, Hu Jintao, was the president of China at that time. So higher offices soon followed later on because he was doing well in politics, and he was a very successful bureaucrat. Now, among the largely faceless ranks of Chinese bureaucrats, Li managed to show an unusually candid streak. So he was very different from the others, and he's said to be the premier now. Now, let me quote something very, very interesting now to you. In a US State Department cable which was released by the WikiLeaks, Li was quoted telling diplomats that Chinese economic growth, which we mentioned about just now, statistics were man-made, and saying that he looked instead to electricity demand, rail cargo, traffic, and lending as more accurate indicators. So basically, he believed in performance and not talking, but these were a few things about, a few attributes about him. Now, though he was not a populist, in his speeches and public appearances, Li was practically typhonic compared to the typically Langrouzi, in fact. So he was, yet he largely failed to make effective use of the platforms which were given to him, unlike his immediate predecessors. And so Li is, China is all set to welcome him. And now, see, one more thing I'll tell you. You can change the head, right? But I'll compare this analogy with Pakistan, or with terrorism for that matter. By killing one Osama bin Laden, by the leadership of Al-Qaeda, they're later on going off to Al-Zawahiri, and now going off to one Egyptian origin gentleman who is based in Iraq, Iran, and he was a lieutenant colonel in the Egyptian Army Special Forces earlier. So when the leadership changes, the ideology does not change. It remains the same. So China can have as many premiers, anyone on the helm of affairs. Ultimately, their expansionist plan, which is a worry to the world, in fact, that will not change, Aarti. That will still remain the same, irrespective of who becomes the premier there.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this particular development.